Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, I am incredibly excited you're here today because we're diving into something that is literally a game changer. We're going to explore how modern economies can solve massive, systemic environmental challenges while actually boosting profitability at the same time. I know, it sounds like a paradox, right? But as you'll see, the evolution of how we view value is changing the game entirely. Let me hit you with a paradigm-shifting question right out of the gate. Do we actually consume products, or do we just use them? I mean, think about it for a second. We consume biological materials, like food, but it makes absolutely zero sense to say that we consume a washing machine or a car or a power drill. We just use them. Shifting our mindset from consuming everything to merely using technical goods is the foundation of everything we're about to cover. So here is our roadmap for today. 1. The circular economy vision. 2. Closed-loop recycling explained. 3. Servitization, access over ownership. 4. Recycling versus servitization. And 5. The economic and systemic benefits. Let's jump in. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the circular economy vision. For the last couple of centuries, we've basically run on a take, make, waste linear model. It brought us prosperity for sure, but it is fundamentally built on extracting finite resources. We desperately need a restorative alternative. Enter the circular economy. What is it? Well, it's a systemic approach that's regenerative by design. It boils down to 3 core principles: eliminate waste and pollution, keep products and materials constantly circulating, and regenerate natural systems. The whole goal is to decouple economic growth from the consumption of those finite resources. This butterfly diagram maps out these material flows perfectly. Notice how it splits the world right down the middle. On the left side, the green side, you've got the biological cycle. That's stuff like food and cotton that safely goes back into the earth to regenerate the soil. But check out the blue side on the right. That is the technical cycle. Things like metals, plastics, synthetic chemicals, they just can't re-enter the environment. They literally have to be continuously cycled through the system so we can capture and recapture their value over and over again. Moving right along to Section 2, Closed-Loop Recycling Explained. Okay, let's talk tactics for keeping those technical materials in play and preserving the value we've already created. There's actually a massive difference between types of recycling here. Open-loop recycling, that's essentially downcycling. Think of paper. It downgrades to a lower quality with every single cycle until it just becomes waste. But closed-loop recycling means materials are reused continually without losing any quality at all. We're talking glass, steel, aluminum. We aren't just delaying the inevitable trip to the landfill, we are keeping materials in a continuous, high-value loop. Let's bring this to life with a real-world example. Plastics usually lose their inherent value just like paper does. But Dell? They actually partnered with Wistron Green Tech to engineer a way to stop the plastics in their devices from deteriorating. They successfully built these incredible closed-loop supply chains that capture old device materials just to make new ones. And the kicker? It doesn't just shrink their environmental footprint. It actively saves the business money while keeping their product quality top-notch. And here is the measurable impact of that. By using these closed-loop recycled plastics instead of pumping out new virgin plastics, Dell reduces its carbon emissions by 11%. It's a textbook example of stopping a technical material from downgrading into waste.
Now for Section 3, Servitization, access over ownership.
All right, now we're getting into a much more disruptive concept. This is a strategy that completely flips the traditional customer-product relationship on its head. It's called servitization, and this directly answers that question we asked at the very beginning of this explainer. Instead of selling a product, a company sells the use of the good. The company actually keeps ownership throughout the product's entire life cycle. So you, as the consumer, are basically just paying for access to the service that the physical object provides. Let's see how different companies are pulling this off. Take Renault. They don't actually sell the batteries in their electric cars. They lease them to you. This guarantees Renault gets those batteries back when they die, meaning they can re-engineer or recycle the critical materials inside. Mudjeans does the exact same thing, but with denim. You lease the jeans, and when you're done, you send them back so they can make new pairs. Literally zero material waste. And what about Apple? They're monetizing product durability. By keeping phones in use longer through over-the-air updates, they've built a massive $80 billion services segment, running at almost double the gross margin of their hardware business. Incredible, right? Which brings us to Section 4, recycling versus servitization. Let's compare these two. So, Let's put these strategies head to head. You can think of closed-loop recycling as sort of the hardware approach. It focuses heavily on the material itself, making sure we prevent any physical downgrade at the very end of a product's life. Servitization, though, that's more like the software approach. It reprograms how we think about ownership entirely. The focus shifts to the service, extending how long the product is used and ensuring the manufacturer never loses control of the physical asset to begin with. When you view these strategies side by side, the whole picture just clicks. Dell scores carbon and cost reductions by intervening right at the material level with recycling. But then you look at Renault and Mud Jeans. By leasing their products, they absolutely guarantee the return of those critical materials. They aren't just sitting around hoping the consumer decides to recycle. They've contractually ensured the materials come right back to the start of the supply chain. Both of these strategies deliver overlapping economic and environmental wins. They just tackle the problem from completely different angles. And finally, Section 5, the economic and systemic benefits. Because shifting to these circular models, it isn't just a nice, feel-good thing to do for the planet. It is highly, highly lucrative on a macroeconomic scale. We are talking 1.8 trillion euros. That is the projected net benefit to Europe alone by the year 2030 if it fully adopts a circular economy. It tackles resource shortages, creates jobs, and generates massive economic growth that is totally decoupled from resource extraction. And down at the unit level, the savings are just as wild. Research actually shows that for complex, medium-lived products, think mobile phones, the cost of remanufacturing a device could be slashed by 50% per unit under these circular models. Making brand new parts from scratch is insanely expensive, but retaining and refurbishing existing materials, that is exactly where the profit margins absolutely explode. Now, you might be wondering, how on earth do we practically manage all these used goods flowing back and forth? The answer is technology. John Atchison, the CEO of Stuffster, points out that accurately pricing used products is the absolute key to boosting circulation. And artificial intelligence is the ultimate tech enabler here. AI can process market conditions and product conditions in the blink of an eye, dynamically pricing used goods to make secondary markets robust, efficient, and super profitable for both businesses and consumers alike. Well, that brings us to the end of this explainer, but I want to leave you with a bit of a challenge. Take a look around at the things you own. How can you shift your own consumption, or maybe even your company's business model, away from a linear path of extracting value and toward a circular path of endlessly circulating it? Because remember, we don't really consume washing machines or power drills. We just use them. So the next time you make a purchase or design a product, ask yourself, are you buying an object, or are you just seeking access to a service?